And welcome back, everybody. Thanks for sticking with us. Mike Bosak's our guest. Mike is longtime volunteer for Landmark Society of Greater Utica. We're going to talk about that in just a second, but we're going to continue for Mohawk for a moment. And Mike, this area was really blessed to have its own airline. I mean, how many counties, areas can say they had their own airline? But we had one, and not only did we have one, we had two.
That's true. The thing about Utica County was that it was ripe for development, and when Robinson, then Mohawk, outgrew Ithaca, which is where they started in 1945, Utica County was the prime location. So the hangar was built, which still stands today, and it was one of the first. Actually, Mohawk was one of the first to use computer reservations and all. The first to have a Link trainer. Actually, Link was an important contributor.
He was on the board, wasn't he?
I believe he was, but also in the transition, he's the one that loaned the money to Robinson/Mohawk to buy those surplus DC-3s. So it was quite a.
And you think about the Utica County Airport now; it's used for the state preparedness organization.
Yes.
But back in the day, when it was an airport, you had the airport itself. You had that huge hangar, you had the reservation center, you had the Link training simulator, you had the hotel, the Horizon Hotel. I mean, it was just a huge complex up there.
Well, the fact that it was the hub really benefited us because you had a lot more flights that had to go deadhead basically back to the shop, back to Utica County, so there were a lot more options as far as flights go than there normally would have been.
Yeah.
So that really helped out.
The Mohawk, I know they had a couple of crashes, but all in all, they had a pretty good safety record, Mike.
Pretty good safety record, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the one that came after Mohawk was Empire.
Yes.
Did you ever get interested in Empire?
Somewhat,
Yeah.
somewhat, a little bit.
Yeah.
And all, it was kind of a fascinating history and all. Didn't last quite as long and all. And again, felt a little devastated after they moved to Syracuse, moved their headquarters to Syracuse.
Yeah.
But you have to follow the market.
Yeah, you and a lot of other people. This airplane, Mike, is...
That is a Convair 240. That was the other workhorse of the fleet. And they had quite a few of those, actually. They had a few of the Convair 440s, which are a larger version of this, and just a handful of the Martin 404s, which were a similar plane. They only had those for about 5 years, but they felt that they wanted to keep the fleet kind of similar and all as far as maintenance go. It just made sense. So a lot of them were actually surplus from another airline and all.
Yeah, the financing of those jets, I don't know how that came about, but boy, you're talking about a huge investment there.
Yes. Well, especially at the same time that they're investing in the executive office building, the simulator building and all that, and also the FH-227s, which, that came shortly after the BAC-111s.
Yeah.
It was quite a substantial lift as far as finances go, and that really put them in the bind.
There was a strike up there, and it was the stewardesses, now called flight attendants, but it was the stewardesses struck. And I think they settled that one, and then the pilots.
That was really the death knell at that point, because they couldn't do anything at that point, and it was financial disaster, unfortunately.
Yeah, the name Mohawk. You look back in aviation history, boy, and you just see that name popping up over and over, and a lot of it is because of what you mentioned, the firsts that they had. First African American stewardess.
Yes.
So they were ahead of the curve, and I don't know if it was Bob Peach or it was the people he had working for him, but they were very innovative, very progressive.
Well, I think a lot of it was Bob Peach, but he did have good people working for him. And another thing about Mohawk that I always love the livery that they have.
Yeah.
The very elegant, the black and white and gray and gold.
Yeah.
And that was the other thing. The 240 Convair were called Cosmopolitan, and the 440s were called Metropolitan.
Yeah, I had the chance, not to get into old war stories, but had a chance to fly for about 15, 20 minutes a Convair 440, which was a thrill of a lifetime,
I imagine it was.
To be able to fly that airplane. And as you say, they had that black and gold livery, stood out, very classic.
Very, very classic.
For a while they changed it. Remember, Mike?
Right at the very end, right in the or early 70s rather, they went to what they were referred to as the buckskin.
Yeah.
I never was
I
really
never
that
cared, no.
fond of that.
No.
I mean, in retrospect, it wasn't that bad. They were trying to change their image and all that, but not compared to a
Yeah.
classic.
Now, do you
Livery's Lace.
remember this, Mike? They also had, for a short time, helicopter service.
Yes, for about a year or so, and it flew from Newark, I believe it was, to Grossinger's. And they had, I think, 2 of them,
Yeah.
Sikorsky's.
Yeah, yeah. And they operated out of JFK, and they operated out of LaGuardia. And they had some, and down to Washington, D.C. was another busy route for them.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So when we come back, well, before we go to that, let me just ask you this about Bob Peach. Bob Peach was a pilot
Yes.
and naval aviator, so he knew what he was talking
Oh,
about.
certainly.
Yeah.
You did.
When we come back, let's talk a little bit about landmarks.
Okay.
Okay. Mike Bosak's our guest. We're talking about Mohawk Airlines. Now we're going to talk a little bit about landmarks and maybe a little bit about Union Station. That's something Mike knows something about. Short break, right back.